Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. All right, welcome back to day 3, our final day together at the International Conference on the Prevention of Youth Homelessness. I'm gonna gauge the crowd right now. By a show of hands, how many folks is this your first ever conference? Ooh. And how many folks, by a show of hand, are feeling extremely tired on day 3? Yeah, learning is very tiring. And learning is really hard. Learning is not just the act of sitting and listening. It involves active reflection, dialogue, and humility to be in that space. And I know you're all doing this, so please give yourself a gentle pat on the back or give yourself some claps, but I want to start off our day with something hopeful. Yesterday, I was really touched by Jeff's talk, and I wanted us to start with hope today. And I found a quote that I think really is suited to our space, because it's not too utopian, you know, we're realists in this room. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. I thought that this quote was appropriate for our work because hope isn't easy to manufacture. It's something that comes from within. In our work, we sometimes operate on the conviction that what we're doing makes sense. And preventing youth homelessness makes sense. I don't think it's fair to say that in this political climate, hope is a reliable resource. But for some, it is their only resource. And in this room, we show up with that conviction that what we're doing is making a difference to someone somewhere. To get our day started, on the same theme of hope, I have a story for you about our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Alex Abramovich, and we were talking about this quote this morning, and I found out a little tidbit I'd like to share with you all. Once upon a time, before the world of academia and research, Dr. Abramovich was like you and I, just a cool person going through their life, and I found out, please don't tell their employer, but I did find out that Alex used to walk around with a graffiti can in his backpack. I'm sure like some of us do. And what he would do is go around the streets and spray paint hope everywhere. And I think that's really cool. So let's start with that. I'm pleased to invite Dr. Alex Abramovich to the stage. He's a senior scientist at the Institute for Mental Health Policy and Research at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He's an associate professor at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. And most recently, Dr. Abramovich has been appointed as a Canada Research Chair in 2S LGBTQ+ youth homelessness and mental health. Dr. Abramovich is an impassioned researcher and has dedicated his career to building and co-creating evidence-informed recommendations for innovative solutions to prevent, reduce, and end 2S LGBTQ+ youth homelessness nationally and internationally. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Wow, thank you so much, Marty, for sharing that very personal detail. Didn't realize you were going to tell everybody. Good morning, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with you this morning. So great to see so many people here bright and early on the final day of the conference. So I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our wonderful speaker this morning. My friend and colleague, who I've known for many years in both a professional and personal capacity, and someone who I have very deep respect for, Dr. Jama Shelton. Dr. Shelton is an associate professor at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College in New York City, and the associate director of the Silberman Center for Sexuality and Gender. Their scholarship is informed by decades of collaboration with queer and trans young people navigating housing precarity, with a focus on counter-narratives and identifying and addressing systemic barriers rooted in cis and heterosexism that limit equitable access to housing for all. Dr. Shelton has presented their work at numerous conferences, both nationally and internationally, and their work has appeared in academic journals such as Children and Youth Services Review, Journal of Social Work Education, Journal of Gender-Based Violence, Social Work, and many more. Jama is also the proud papa of a very active 6-year-old child and a 4-year-old husky mix, who Jama describes as being more like a small pony rather than a dog. Jama truly wishes that they could be here in person with us in Toronto. And Jama actually messaged me last night saying that they're having major FOMO. Jama also expressed much gratitude to the conference organizers for the opportunity to pre-record and share their talk over video. Unfortunately, they are not able to travel internationally at this time due to the political climate in the United States, which has become a very unsafe situation for trans and gender diverse people. As a trans person, the gender markers on Jama's identity documents do not match, which Jama is going to speak a bit more about in their talk. Jama is most definitely missed here at the conference, but we are very grateful to have them join us over video and very much look forward to hearing their talk. And with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jama Shelton.
Wow, Alex, thank you for that introduction. It's weird to say that because I'm not actually hearing it because I'm pre-recording this, but I imagine I will have read it and also be really happy about it. So I met Alex like 15 years ago. We were both working on our dissertation research, both about queer and trans youth homelessness, me in New York City and Alex in Toronto. And we met because we ended up speaking on a webinar together. We had never met before, and we ended up connecting, and we've since worked together, like, presented multiple conferences globally. We've collaborated on some research and writing. We even co-edited a book together, which is really cool. And so while all of the work that we've done together is really important, what's more meaningful is how we have supported each other through all of these years, right? So like we have navigated careers as out trans people. We have started new jobs. We've started families. And even when we're not engaged in a specific project together, we're connected, right? Like we have always been in it together. I have zero doubts about that. And I might even venture to say that we love each other, although those are not words that I've ever actually said about a relationship. And so love is on my mind a lot lately. I've been reading all about love by Bell Hooks, and I'm living a life that is actually full of love in so many ways. And I'm living that life in a social and political context that is actually full of hate. And so like in my community organizing classes where I share the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, Prentice Hemphill, and many, many others, I challenge my students to think about what our movements would look like, or like what our work would look like if it was led from a place of love. They really struggle with that, like being able to even like imagine what that could look like in practice. And honestly, I have not had concrete answers for them. I've sort of been like, well, you'll know it when you see it, or you'll know it when you do it, which, you know, as a professor is probably probably like not the best response. But that is also true. Those pieces of it are true. What's also true is that there's not like a concrete roadmap for that, right? So anyway, this idea of love is actually at the core of a lot of what I'm going to be talking to you about today, what we'll be spending this time thinking about together. Alex, let me start by saying that I love you. And I'm not going to do what I would typically do when I say something like that to someone that I'm not married to or that I'm not the parent of, which is to very quickly qualify it by saying, well, like not in a creepy way, or like not in an inappropriate way, or, you know, whatever way that I feel like it would need to be qualified. Why is it so hard for us to do that? Like, why can't we just accept that we feel love, or that someone has those kinds of feelings for us without qualifying it? So thank you so much for having me here with you today. And thank you for being here with me, even though this is a pre-recorded video. And I know that you've probably been sitting and listening to people talk about some really important things for very many hours. So thank you for being here for this. I really wish I could be there with you in person. I've actually had the privilege to travel to Toronto many times over the past decade plus, and also a couple of other Canadian cities to collaborate on work around queer and trans youth homelessness. And I want to say that I have only positive experiences and like deep respect for both the way that I have been welcomed into the work, and the way that you do the work, and also the fun that you have while you're doing the work. At least that has been my experience when I've had the pleasure to be there with you doing the work. And so while I'm like completely honored to be here and to have been invited to share this space with you, you know, I was kind of actually surprised at the invitation. um, because in my mind, when I have a question about youth homelessness prevention, or most things related to youth homelessness in general, like I look to Canada. So I looked at the list of speakers and I was literally like, what could I possibly say that would add any kind of value to this conversation about youth homelessness prevention? I mean, I would literally be coming to many of you if I had questions about something related to the topic. Um, but, you know, it's good to ask that question of ourselves occasionally, right? Like, what value do I add here? Um, because we get into our routines, we like go to work, we do our jobs, we fulfill our responsibilities, we do our household tasks, we go about our daily lives in this way because that's what we do, right? We do what we do. We manage programs, we fulfill our duties. And it's not to say that these things don't add value. Like they're very valuable. Like in and of their in themselves, they add value. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what is your unique value? So how are you showing up in the job or in the role or in the family or in the relationship, in a way that incorporates your specific contributions, like your specific unique value that only you can bring? What are you bringing to the work? And so, and asking myself those questions, and I'll say I'm on sabbatical this year. So for those of you in professions or positions where that is a possibility, it's an extremely luxurious uh, possibility and time to really kind of reflect on some deep questions about, well, what am I doing and where's my value? Like, where's my work going? I believe that we should all, anyone in any world, should be able to have a moment like that in life. Like, I recognize it as such a privilege to say, like, I've been doing this kind of work for a while, and let me pause and see, like, where I'm going with it, and do I still feel fired up about it, and what are my new ideas, or am I under such pressure to be productive or to like meet certain outcomes or whatever it is? Am I under so much pressure that I'm not even thinking anymore? I'm just doing what I do, right? Um, so anyway, in asking all of these questions in preparation for this talk, I realized that yes, like I do have something to add to the conversation. And it will likely seem like, at least at first, more maybe theoretical or heady than practical. Like, I'm not offering like a BuzzFeed top 10 funny list, clever list of how to best prevent youth homelessness, or something like that. And you might even find yourself at some point thinking like, exactly where are they going with this? Because my brain very rarely works in like hyper organized linear pathways. But I'm going to ask you to trust me and to just relax a little bit in your seats and be open to what I say today. So what I'm offering, not the BuzzFeed top 10 list, but I am offering a moment for us to all put aside what is and to allow some space to imagine what could be. And I'll also offer some thoughts about how we might get to that what could be place together. And honestly, I think whatever each of you could individually imagine about what could be in relation to youth homelessness is probably shockingly similar across people, across nations, across cities, across programs, right? Like we probably, if we had our like top 3 wishes about what the world looked like as it relates to youth homelessness and youth homelessness prevention, I bet they would be really similar. And that's a really important starting point, this ability to imagine together. So now I'm going to start the actual like talk part of the talk, if you wondered where I was going. And I'm going to start it with a dedication. So this is a practice I recently learned from a colleague that of opening with a dedication as a way of recognizing where this work comes from and how and why it lives in me in this particular moment in time. And so today I dedicate this work to a younger me who growing up queer and without the language for it or understanding of it in a rural Mississippi town somehow made it here with you today. And I also dedicate today to my grandma, Lois, who was an amazingly bold woman at a time when women were not supposed to be bold and in places where women were not supposed to be bold. And she fiercely loved me, which is so critically important for a child who didn't often feel so loved, right? That's also important for adults too, you know. So I frequently open with this quote when I am talking about queer and trans youth homelessness or conducting trainings about the topic. I can't say who I am unless you agree I'm real by Amiri Baraka, his poem Numbers Letters. And I encourage people to think about like whatever their role is, a case manager, human resources professional, educator, database developer, researcher, whatever the role is, how can you ensure that your work can reinforce the truth that the young people you work with are real and that their experiences are real and that they are who they say they are? And so I'm opening with this quote today for a similar reason, but within quite a different context. And as this is an international conference, I'm not sure how much y'all are aware about what's happening right now in the United States. I think you know from my introduction that I'm not there with you in person because the gender markers on my identification documents don't match. And so I'm afraid to leave the country right now, both because my gender markers don't match and there's uncertainty about what would happen to my documents if that was discovered or if I would be let back into the country. And then also because the political landscape here is shifting so dramatically and so quickly that I don't want to be out of the country and away from my family for any period of time. It just does not feel safe. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about some of the stuff that's happening because it provides a context for what I'm bringing to this talk today, and B, I think it's important to make sure that people have this information because it's not really clear from my end what types of information is making it out into the world. And as a researcher and community organizer and social worker in a country that has led the way in some respects around issues of youth homelessness, particularly queer and trans youth homelessness. I think it's important that everyone knows what's happening, because I think we're going to need some support, right? Like I think we're not the we may not be the people to go to, right? Like, and not to sound like I feel like, as I just said that out loud, I sounded like a cocky American that's like thinks that we know everything. But I hope you remember in this moment what I said in the very beginning, which is I was surprised that I was invited, because I feel like Canada like leads the way, right? And like I would, if I were to go for advice, it would be to one of you, which I've frequently done in the past. So anyway, I'm rambling. So one of the things that's happening, or that has happened, is many of our federal websites, hubs of information, like the Center for Disease Control, CDC, and all federal administration websites were taken down, and then a court order required that were reinstated. So here's an example of what it looks like now if you were to go visit the CDC website and want to learn about health disparities among LGBTQ youth. There's no T there any longer, and there's a statement at the top of the page. When these websites were reinstated, this statement appears on any page that has anything to do with trans identity or gender diversity. So it says, per a court order, HHS, which is Health and Human Services, is required to restore this website as of date and time. Any information on this page promoting gender ideology is extremely inaccurate and disconnected from the immutable biological reality that there are two sexes, male and female. The Trump administration rejects gender ideology and condemns the harms it causes to children by promoting their chemical and surgical mutilation, and to women by depriving them of their dignity, safety, well-being, and opportunities. This page does not reflect biological reality, and therefore the administration and this department rejects it. Now look, however you feel about these claims that are being made, I have very strong feelings about them, perhaps obviously because I'm a trans person and a scientist, and I'm familiar with the research. Regardless of how you feel about it, like the fact that there is a governing body that is limiting our access to information and determining what science is real and not real is incredibly terrifying and dangerous, right? I'm not going to go through every one in that same detail, but that one felt really important to me. So there's been a federal healthcare ban enacted for folks that are 18 and under around gender affirming care, but there are also moves to restrict adults' access to gender affirming care. The federal ban on youth gender affirming care has been halted for a moment, but that doesn't mean the people that stopped care have restarted care. We're living in a culture of, I think, fear and anxiety, right? Some doctors in some states are allowed to refuse treatment to trans people because of religious freedom. Our highest offices of Health and Human Services are only recognizing two sexes, male and female. This leaves out intersex people. They're saying gender isn't real, right? So it leaves out a lot of human variation. This isn't just about trans people, though I'm focusing on that right now. Removing the Trump administration moves to strip trans people of employment discrimination protections. And some states, some folks are ordering the State Department to stop issuing accurate passports to trans people. And there are documented stories of trans people going to even try to get their passports even like renewed under the sex they were assigned at birth and having their passports confiscated. So we're also in a place where people are not allowed to have access to documents that would enable them to travel outside of the country. Our National Park Service also has removed references to trans and queer people on the Stonewall National Monuments webpage. And this isn't all just about gender. All of this is connected, though. They're not only limiting access to information and education around gender, queer and gender things. It's also related to race. They're very critical of critical race theory, and see anything related to diversity, equity, inclusion as divisive and anti-American. Our immigration enforcement agencies have been rounding up and detaining people across the country and putting them in detention centers or camps, as some people are referring to them, both inside the country and outside the country. I live in a tiny town, literally 1.5 square mile town in New Jersey, and I was outside my daughter's elementary school a day and a half after the executive order was issued. So it's sort of everywhere. Also, shutting down, doing a federal funding freeze, limited access to funding for programs that were already in operation, research studies that were already in operation. The National Institutes of Health budget cuts really threatened to wipe out entire fields of research and drastically impact higher education. And yeah, that's the same headline for one that I just said. So again, I'm opening with this quote today. It's the same idea, and it's a different context for me at this moment. And I recognize that many people have experienced this kind of oppression very intimately for centuries, right? Like the experience of being part of a targeted group, the experience of living in a state of hypervigilance and fear, of wondering like if and when they may need to flee their home for safety, or like where they could go, right? But this experience is not entirely new to me. I experienced housing instability and homelessness as a young adult. And so some of these feelings are familiar, like, where am I going to go? Will I be safe? Like, how am I going to make it? But the degree of it and the systematic nature of hatred being legislated, hatred for me and people like me, is new to me. And so it's really impacting, every aspect of my life and the people that I know and love and work with and care about. And so I can't not bring it in to the conversation today, because it's informing everything that I'm doing and every way that I'm thinking about being able to continue doing the work that we do under different circumstances, right? How we do that, how we vision that work, what the future of it could look like, right? And that's work that we do together. So I also just want to recognize that it's actually a privilege, I know, to be feeling this way for the first time at the age of 50, like to be feeling this under threat in such a systematic way. So it's important to acknowledge that. And so here are a couple of things that I've been thinking about and learning like so far through this process. It's literally only been not like almost a month, and it feels like 7 years. So connection is imperative. Connection to yourself, so that you can locate your own self in your own body in this moment in time, so that you can be grounded and react to what's happening and prepare for what could come and be able to think creatively about what that world looks like. Connection to other people, right? So connection to community. We care for each other. We're being harmed together, and we need to heal together, and we need to vision together. And the other thing is that things cannot and will not continue as they have been. Something new has to happen. And that's a statement that I might have said, like, honestly, like, if I'd been doing this talk a year ago, and I think about like youth homelessness in general and youth homelessness prevention, like I think for a while I've been saying like something new has to happen, right? What can we not see? Like, what are we missing? So something new has to happen. And when I think about it here in my current context, it really is, it really seems like all like notions of humanity are gone for I was going to say a large swath of people, but that's not accurate for like folks who have power. Like humanity has been lost. And because people have the power and the power of media and communication, the ability to spread certain messages, I think that message of like who is worthy, who's a worthy human, and who is not, is getting disseminated and misinformation is getting disseminated, right? And so this idea of humanity and like how like where is our humanity? How do we like acknowledge it in our daily lives, and how do we like acknowledge it within systems and structures that just squash it out of us all the time? I think that there's a really important lesson in that for us as it relates to youth homelessness. So right now you might be like, okay, yeah, sure. I have no idea anything that you've said in the however many minutes you've been talking, but I'm going to ask you to stick with me, and hopefully it's going to make sense as we continue to sort of like go on this journey together. Um, so if you would, though, right now, I'm going to ask you to turn to a person sitting beside you and just ask them this question: why do you do the work that you do? And I'll pause here for a minute or two so that you have a moment to have a quick conversation. I do really wish that I was there to hear some of your responses. Some responses that I've heard in the past that may be true for some of you are I do this work because I care about young people. I do this work because everyone deserves a home, because housing is a human right, because I don't want anyone to experience what I experienced, and or because I want to help. And so, yes, like I say yes to all of these, and also why. Like, I want to know, like, what is the why to your why? And here's why I'm asking that question. Almost 10 years ago, I was at a listening session with young people, program directors, and policymakers at the White House in Washington, D.C. And the question was posed to young people: how can programs better support you? Like, tell us what staff can do to like make this better for you. And I remember a response from this one person who I think had not actually spoken all day. And they'd said, we just want them to love us. That's all. Um, I've carried that with me for a decade. Like, we just want them to love us. That's all. And talking about love can make people feel uncomfortable, like especially in our work, right? Like, I'm a social worker, so my training was all about like boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And I'm not saying that boundaries are not good. Like, boundaries are good. Like, please don't mishear me on that. And also, boundaries and love can coexist. And I think like many of us know that because many of us are in relationship with someone or ones we love. So a family member, a partner, a kid, a best friend. But when people talk about love in this work, like when people talk about like loving the young people that we work with, but I don't think that actually I don't think people talk about it. And that's kind of my point, right? Like, why don't we? And like, what would it mean if we did? What would it mean if our work was led from a place of love? I have told my therapist a handful of times in the years that we've worked together that I love her. I know that she can't say it back. She's told me it's like not appropriate. It's too loaded. There's a power imbalance, it crosses boundaries, or that's not the nature of our relationship. Like, there's so many reasons why. But once, though, in the midst of this like weeks long disagreement we were having, I remember saying something like in almost like sort of a desperate tantrumy way, like, this is so hard. I don't want to be fighting with you because I just love you. Sob, sob, sniff, sniff, right? And then reflexively, she said, I love you too, and we will work this out. And we've never talked about it. And I realized as I was like putting this talk together that I should probably tell her, because it had such a profound impact on me. And those are just words. Like, those words don't do it justice. That experience changed the way that I saw myself in relation to another person, and therefore changed my life. It changed the way I'm able to interact with other people in relationship. I'm not exaggerating. Not exaggerating when I say that. So, again, I get that she's not supposed to say it. And it's uncomfortable to talk about, especially in the context of power dynamics that exist between therapist and patient, or worker and client, or social worker, case manager, program manager, and young person, unhoused youth. But why? Like, who taught us that love is only appropriate in certain contexts or under certain circumstances and certain conditions? Like, what feels so dangerous about it? And I would argue it's not dangerous for us. It's dangerous for people who want to continue to have power over us. Um, so again, I'm going to pose this question from Adrienne Marie Brown. This is her a book I highly recommend, Emergent Strategy. And she asks, what would our movements look like if they were led from a place of love? And I think it's Prentice Hemphill who goes a little bit, like they work together, they talk together and say, like, what if we fueled our movements, fueled our work, fueled our movements with our love and our hope rather than our rage? How would that change the way that we view the work, and how would that change the way that we do the work? And so to start with, I think we need a definition of love. And we all know the importance of definitions in our work. We've been focusing on them for decades, and at least in the United States, we don't yet have a consistent definition of youth, and we don't yet have a consistent definition of homelessness. And this impedes our ability to develop and implement solutions to prevent and end youth homelessness on a large scale, because each federal agency, policy, funding mechanism, and program has its own set of definitions of these terms. Bell Hooks, who I've been reading lately, I think I mentioned, I'm going to talk a lot about some reading I've been doing because A, I'm on sabbatical, and B, I'm looking for some hope these days, so I'm doing a lot of reading, and C, I'm a nerd. So Bell Hooks writes that definitions are vital starting points for the imagination, and that what we cannot imagine cannot come into being. She also says that we're taught to think of love as a feeling, and that we're taught that we have no control over our feelings. But love is not just a feeling. Love is an action, actually. And while we may have adopted the belief that we cannot control or choose our feelings, I think most of us would agree that we can, for the most part, choose or control our actions, and that our actions have consequences to which we should be held accountable. So to begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one way that we can begin to cultivate accountability and responsibility for the ways that we interact with one another. She also says that there can be no love without justice, and that love and abuse actually just cannot coexist. No one can rightfully claim to be loving when behaving abusively. So let's think for a minute about the systems in which we work, the systems that young people interact with, sometimes voluntarily and sometimes without their consent. Child welfare systems, juvenile legal systems, homelessness and housing systems. Do young people feel loved within them? Are there ways in which these systems that are meant to support young people, are there ways that they're causing harm? Are there are ways that systems are neglecting young people or some aspect of who they are. These questions are not meant to vilify these systems or to vilify the people that work within them. These questions are actually just an invitation to reflect on what you've experienced, to reflect on the stories that you've heard from young people, and to think about how things might look differently. If the entire purpose, the single most important outcome of interest was that every young person feels loved within the system they're in, then we could break that down. If thinking about this at a systems level seems too hard to imagine, because you might be thinking, can a system be loving? And I'm gonna argue that it can, as long as there are still human beings working within the system. But still, it's good to start small. So starting small is another lesson that I've learned from Adrienne Marie Brown, who says how we are on a small scale is how we are on a large scale. So, what if the primary outcome of interest was that every young person coming into contact with your program or your service, whatever word you use to describe it, experiences love there? Or even smaller still, because another thing Adrienne Marie Brown teaches us is that what we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system. So, what if every young person that you interact with during their time within the program or the system or the study or the fill in the blank where you are working, what if every young person you interacted with experienced some type of love within that interaction? And what we know from bell hooks now is that we're not talking about love as feeling only. We are talking about love as action. So I'm not suggesting that you blindly start telling every young person that you love them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking you to think about what it looks like in the context of your work, program, institution, or system to enact love. One way that it can look, this is one way, there are many ways. One way that it can look is by allowing young people to direct your actions. So we need to listen and respond. And so, what do I mean by this? Since this is a conference on youth homelessness prevention and I'm a researcher, I thought I would, for a moment, share a research related thing here. This is a participatory action research project from a couple of years ago with young people with lived experience of homelessness, talking about youth homelessness prevention, both from a young person perspective and a provider perspective. Before I even go into it, if you're like a hardcore researcher, I am aware that the numbers I'm going to present to you are tiny. So this is not in any way meant to be generalizable. Also, this is an international conference, and this is a small study in the US, but that's not the point. Here's the point. So we asked young people came up with these questions on their own and then created a survey and sent it out to other young people. We asked them what could have prevented their experience of homelessness, and they could select from this list as many things as they wanted, right? It wasn't just like choose one. So what you'll see here is that, again, small numbers, 71% said more affordable housing, 69% said greater income. Coming in third was mental health supports, and then fourth, rental assistance. When we asked them to choose one, like what one thing would have had the most impact on you not having had an experience of homelessness, the number one answer was greater income, followed by more affordable housing. And so this is really important, right? Because, oops, went to that slide too quickly. This is really important because our young people are telling us something that would have helped them, and yet how much money are we funneling into interventions that adults have decided, and maybe even scientifically so, right? But that adults have decided are the right ones for young people. So when we ask young people questions and they tell us their truth, do we just keep doing what we've been doing because it's how we do things, or do we shift? So if you thought in your mind just now, we shift, then give us all a little jazz hand action and say it out loud. If you've been in a talk with me in person before, you know jazz hands have to come in at some point. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we shift. Thanks for that. So I'm going to conclude by highlighting a couple of paradigm shifts that I believe are necessary if we are to further and effectively build an international movement to prevent youth homelessness. So one, connection and vision with a dash of radical hope. We have to be able to imagine the future that we want and to do that collectively. And in order to do that, we have to be connected to one another and be in relationship with one another. And we need to be bold about it. Prentice Hemphill, who I'll mention again, and you should totally look them up because they've got a lot to say about changing the world. Prentice Hemphill often talks about Harriet Tubman when they talk about visioning. Harriet Tubman was not limited by the realities of her situation, which was horrific, right? She knew what the reality was. She knew what her realities were, but somehow she managed to like see around what was, and like find something else that was possible. She was able to not accept her reality. There is something else there, right? So she was able to do that. And, I, for one, am growing quite tired of hearing well, this is the way it is. This is how the system works. So we got to work with what we've got. I mean, especially in my current context, right? We have to speak up, right? We don't have to keep doing the same things we've always been doing because that's how we've been doing them. And we also don't have to do the things someone tells us to do when they go against every fiber of our being and our values and our work. So one of the things that, again, Adrienne Marie Brown, one of the things that she teaches us or that she says is perhaps the most egregious thing we are taught is that we should just be really good at what's already possible and to leave the impossible alone. So I find that super inspiring and think it really reinforces, reflects that idea of being able to see around the reality and imagine what could be in its place. We also need radical hope. Pam Houston says, hope is holding tight to a vision of care and compassion we might make real in the world with our hearts and our hands. And finally, we need to lead with love and remember that love is an action, and really think about what we do and how we are, what we're bringing and how we show up through this lens of love as action. And we need to start small. Yet another nod to Adrienne Marie Brown. How we are on a small scale is how we are on a large scale. And what we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system. This idea is particularly relevant in my life and in my work right now. When power is being wielded in hateful and life-threatening ways at the national level, we have to assess where we act, where we fight, where we connect, and how we move. And the answer has been and is for me right now small. That small is it. Small is all. Think hyperlocal. create the conditions you want for the future, even in the like smallest ways that you can. And in your like translate that into work in youth homelessness prevention. Like, what can you do even at the smallest level if you don't have the power to like readjust the entire system? What is the thing that you can do that will have a reverberating ripple effect out that you can't even imagine what could be, like what that effect could be? Again, I'm going to tell you something else that I read recently. I warned you that this would happen. The author and professor Megan Giddings said, resist the urge to be the savior or the star, because that too is a capitalist construction. People need each other in small ways. Let yourself be a small, beloved piece of someone else's life. And when things get hard, double down on your connections and stay. This is the final words of other people that I'm going to share with you. But Pam Houston, this idea of staying, this is a recent piece in response to what's happening. I will stay if you will stay. Together, we can tend the earth and our animals and each other, which ought to have been our primary job all along. This nation is dying of denial, so we will live into and out of our sadness and regret. There will be joy too, and laughter, because that is another thing that people can make together. We can surround ourselves with the words of the ones we trust most, and we can write so many words together. We can take turns keeping watch while the others are sleeping. No more looking up or out for a savior. We were born both to provide and accept this version of radical care. We are in a position where we are unable to be reliant on the systems that were here to support our livelihood and our lives and our basic needs, right? And that's the case for many people across the globe in many different contexts and periods of time, right? This is not like a new phenomenon. I know that. But so think about this in terms of our work to prevent youth homelessness. What does our movement to prevent youth homelessness look like when it's led from a place of love? How do we ensure the humanity of everyone we work with when we're sometimes working within climates that attempt to erase and dehumanize them, or erase and dehumanize us, actually? And while we work locally to strengthen our connections and deepen our relationships with one another, how do we leverage our cross-national connections to more strongly imagine and enact the futures that we desire for ourselves and for the young people that we work with? I don't have answers to these questions. We have to answer them together. And I thought this room full of really creative and compassionate people would be a really good place to start. So thank you so much for your time today. And even though I can't actually see you, because I'm not actually there, you have become and you are a small, beloved piece of my life. And this experience and you have provided me the opportunity to connect with our collective work, which has been really grounding during a time when the future seems really unpredictable and very likely quite bleak. So I'm really grateful to you for that. And I'm gonna send it back to Alex now for some comments and reflection. Thank you.
Wow, that was very, very powerful. And although Jama is not here in person, I do want to say thank you so much, Jama, for your incredibly thoughtful, moving, and powerful talk. Jama has such a way of speaking, living, and doing directly from the heart, and I'm truly grateful to have them in my life and for our continuous collaborations and friendship. So now I'd like to offer a short reflection about Jama's talk and the Canadian context. Canada is not immune to the anti-2S LGBTQ+ political climate that Jama described in the United States. Violence against 2S LGBTQ+ individuals across North America has reached its highest point over recent years. From a local Canadian context, there has been a significant rise in hate and violence towards 2S LGBTQ+ populations across Canada, many of whom are currently experiencing or have at some point in time experienced homelessness or housing precarity. Safety remains a major concern for many 2S LGBTQ+ individuals, particularly youth who continuously report unsafe situations, whether it be in their family home or after they've been kicked out or forced to leave home, and attempt to access support and safety through housing and healthcare services. Far too many 2S LGBTQ youth and young adults do not receive the support and care they need and deserve, and continue to be unsafe after leaving home. Unfortunately, homophobic and transphobic violence and discrimination often persist in housing programs, leading youth to find alternative, temporary, and insecure housing. No young person should have to make the decision to sleep in a cemetery because that is their safest option in a city like Toronto, or really anywhere in the world. This is completely unacceptable. And it actually blows my mind that here we are in 2025 still talking about this, that somehow we haven't figured it out enough to implement lasting solutions. Or perhaps we have, but the people in charge just aren't listening. As Jama shared, things cannot continue as they have been. Something new desperately needs to happen. And I believe that collectively here as a group, we do have many incredible ideas that can transform the systems that we currently have in place and create lasting solutions to prevent and end youth homelessness. I love everything that Jama shared about radical love, care, and hope. I know that many times in my own work, when I've taken the extra time and made space to truly be with the young people participating in my research and, for example, taking them for a coffee or for a meal after an interview, how unbelievably grateful they were to be cared for and listened to, and how it brought a sense of ease and just allowed them to take a deep breath and feel safe, which is really what so many young people want, is to feel safe, to be safe, and as Jama shared, to feel loved. And I also agree with Jama that we should all take the time to think about how we can allow love and care to show up in our work, in the work that we do every day, and what it would look like for our work to be led from a place of love. I believe that it can be profoundly impactful, especially for young people who have been told over and over again that they do not matter. More than ever, it is absolutely critical that we prioritize and commit to 2S LGBTQ+ inclusion in all aspects of the work that we do. All levels of government need to commit to prioritizing and addressing the rise in anti-2S LGBTQ+ hate and violence that is happening across Canada. And to address one more point that Jama mentioned in their talk, for the record, I love you too, Jama. And so before I end off, I just want to say that the last concurrent sessions begin at 10:15. So there's a little bit of time, so feel free to take a break in between before the last concurrent sessions of the conference begin. Thank you so much.